The six-figure salary was supposed to be the finish line, the number that finally meant somebody had made it. For decades in America, crossing $100,000 a year was the moment a person could exhale and feel safe. It was the number on the birthday card, the number whispered at family dinners, the quiet symbol of a life that worked. But something strange is happening to the people who actually reach that number today. And almost nobody explains it honestly. They hit six figures, and instead of relief washing over them, they feel like they are barely keeping their head above water. A recent Bankrate survey found that 77% of American adults feel financially insecure, including plenty of people earning well above the median. More than a quarter of them said it would now take $150,000 a year just to feel comfortable. So there is a question sitting underneath all of this that deserves a real answer, not another lazy shrug about the economy. Why does $100,000 in America suddenly feel a whole lot closer to $50,000? The first answer is the one everybody has heard 1,000 times. And on its own, it is only half the story. Inflation quietly chewed through the value of every single dollar year after year, while the paycheck barely seemed to notice. Using the Consumer Price Index, $100,000 today carries roughly the same buying power as $54,000 did in the year 2000. Therefore, the dollar has lost almost half of its real value in the span of about 25 short years. That fact alone would explain a paycheck feeling a little thinner. And most videos would stop the explanation right there. But inflation by itself does not explain why modern life feels specifically, personally, brutally harder than one shrinking number suggests. Because here is the part that actually matters. The part that quietly rearranges everything once a person sees it. Not everything got more expensive at the same speed. And that single detail is the whole secret. The fun stuff got cheaper, while the stuff a person absolutely cannot live without got wildly, painfully more expensive. Televisions, clothing, software, furniture, and gadgets have barely moved in price, and in many cases they actually dropped. Therefore, the things people buy for enjoyment quietly became more affordable across the last 2 decades, almost without anyone noticing. But the things nobody is ever allowed to skip went screaming in the complete opposite direction. And they went fast. From the year 2000 to recent years, hospital and healthcare costs climbed by roughly 220%. College tuition and fees shot up around 178% over that very same stretch of time. Childcare rose about 115%, quietly turning one of life's basic needs into a second mortgage payment. Housing and food climbed somewhere in the range of 80%, and far more than that in the hottest cities. Across all of it, average hourly wages rose only about 100%, which sounds decent until it is compared honestly. So the paycheck roughly doubled, while the price of simply staying healthy more than tripled in plain sticker terms. Therefore, a family can earn far more dollars than their parents ever did and still feel like they are steadily losing ground. This is the trap almost nobody names out loud, and it explains that hollow, confusing six-figure feeling almost perfectly. The expenses a person is allowed to avoid quietly got cheaper, and the expenses they can never avoid completely ran away. Housing, healthcare, education, and childcare are the 4 cost curves that have quietly outrun American wages for decades now. And those 4 things happen to be the exact bills that decide whether a life feels stable or feels like drowning. Look at housing alone, because it might be the clearest picture of how far the finish line actually moved. The median American home now costs well over $400,000, which is roughly 5 times the average annual wage. A generation ago, a typical house cost closer to 2 or 3 times what a family earned in a single year. Therefore, the same milestone that once took a few years of saving can now take well over a decade. The median age of a first-time home buyer in America has climbed from 29 in the early 80s to about 40 today. That is not laziness, and it is not avocado toast, no matter how many times someone tries to sell that tired story. That is a finish line quietly sliding 11 years further down the track, while people run as hard as they ever have. Now, to be fair, $100,000 is still genuinely a lot of money. And that part is true. It still lands a single earner in roughly the top 20% of individual incomes across the entire country. But being in the top 20% and still feeling broke at the end of the month is exactly the paradox. Therefore, the problem was never that $100,000 is small, because it clearly is not small at all. The problem is that it no longer buys the calm, stable, middle-class life that it so confidently used to promise. 2 generations ago, one six-figure income could reliably cover a house, a family, healthcare, and a real retirement, all at once. Today, that same income often stretches thin across just the housing and the childcare, with almost nothing left to spare. Therefore, the number on the paycheck stayed impressive, while the life that number is supposed to buy quietly got smaller. Now look one level deeper, because the wage side of this story is somehow even stranger than the price side. Between the year 2000 and today, the productivity of the American worker rose by roughly 45%. Over that exact same stretch, the real inflation-adjusted pay for that work rose by only about 25%. Therefore, workers produce dramatically more value every single hour, yet somehow kept a shrinking slice of what they created. That missing 20 points is a massive part of why raw effort stopped translating into the life that it used to buy. People are running faster and smarter than their parents ever had to, and still ending each month somewhere near zero. And this is exactly where the real lens on the entire problem finally snaps into sharp, uncomfortable focus. America now quietly runs on 2 completely different economies, stacked right on top of each other, playing by opposite rules. The first one is the wage economy, where a person trades their limited hours for dollars that slowly leak value over time. The second one is the asset economy, where the things people own, like stocks and real estate, tend to grow faster than prices rise. Therefore, anyone living purely on a paycheck is sprinting on a treadmill that quietly speeds up a little bit every year. Meanwhile, the person who owns even a slice of the asset economy is standing on a floor that keeps rising beneath them. One person is swimming hard against the current, and the other is simply floating up with the tide as it comes in. That is the true reason 100,000 in wages can feel like 50, while 100,000 in assets feels like plenty. The six-figure earner is often winning the game that shrinks, while sitting completely out of the game that actually grows. So the finish line did not disappear, and hard work did not suddenly stop mattering in this country. The finish line simply moved, and the rules of the entire race quietly changed underneath everybody's feet at the same time. Which leads straight to the only question that the rest of this really comes down to. How does a person outrun it? The good news is that the same 2 economy trap points directly, almost like an arrow, at the way back out of it. The core move is painfully simple to say and genuinely hard to do. Stop depending only on wages and start owning assets. Move number 1 is to get a real foothold in the asset economy as early as humanly possible. Even a tiny one. Cash sitting untouched in a checking account is basically guaranteed to lose value, slowly and silently, every single year that passes. Historically, owning broad stock index funds has been one of the most reliable ways for ordinary people to outrun inflation over time. Owning a piece of real companies means owning things that can raise their own prices right as the dollar keeps weakening. Therefore, even a modest amount invested consistently can slowly carry a person from the shrinking game over into the growing one. The point is not to gamble on the next hot stock, because that is just the wage economy panic wearing a costume. The point is boring, patient ownership that quietly compounds in the background while a person lives the rest of their life. Move number 2 is to grow real, valuable skills faster than the essentials keep inflating in the world around them. Skills behave almost exactly like assets because they appreciate over time and keep paying out for years, sometimes for entire decades. A person who becomes dramatically more valuable at their craft can raise their income faster than housing and healthcare climb. Therefore, the real goal is not simply landing a raise, but building a rate of income growth that finally outruns the essential bills. A 3% raise in a year when the true essentials rose 8% is not progress. It is a quiet pay cut. Move number 3 is one that silently changes everything, and it is the one that most people completely overlook. Where a person chooses to live can matter just as much as how much money they actually earn. sometimes even more. $100,000 in Manhattan is worth only about $30,000 once taxes and the cost of living take their bite. That very same $100,000 in a place like Oklahoma City stretches to nearly $90,000 in real, usable spending power. Therefore, two people with the exact same paycheck can live in two completely different financial universes based on geography alone. In a world where remote and flexible work keeps expanding, that gap has quietly become one of the biggest levers available. Move number 4 is to stop treating a pile of cash like a safe harbor, because in this economy, it slowly sinks. Holding a huge amount of idle money feels responsible and cautious, but inflation charges a quiet, relentless tax on it every year. A solid emergency fund of a few months of expenses is genuinely smart, and it is absolutely worth protecting at all costs. But every extra dollar left sitting far beyond that cushion is a dollar quietly shrinking instead of quietly going to work. Put those 4 moves together, and a clear pattern rises out of what first looked like completely hopeless, demoralizing math. The wage economy alone was never going to win this particular race, no matter how hard or how long anyone ran on it. The people who actually feel like they are outrunning inflation are almost always standing at least partly in the asset economy. They own something, they sharpen their skills, they live somewhere that respects their dollar, and they refuse to let cash rot. None of that requires being born wealthy, and absolutely none of it happens by accident or by simply hoping it works out. It starts the exact moment a person stops asking only how to earn more and starts asking what they can actually own. The wage will always be capped by the hours in a day, but ownership keeps working long after a person clocks out. Because the paycheck was never truly the finish line, no matter how impossibly good 6 figures once sounded to everyone, ownership was the finish line the entire time, quietly waiting on the far side of that endless, speeding treadmill. And the sooner that single idea finally clicks into place, the sooner $100,000 can start feeling like $100,000 again.